Welcome to my site, everybody. My name is Paul Smyers. I'm a practicing real estate agent in the beautiful state of Virginia in the Shenandoah Valley. And I get inquiries from people who want to move into the rural areas because I'm a specialist in rural property. I love the countryside life and I'm a very big fan of homesteading type of lifestyle. I've lived in a rural area for a very long time, and we can have a little fun today talking about some of the things that you find in a rural area that you just won't find anywhere else. Some of it is actually quite amusing, and then there's just normal practical things that you got to consider. So we'll start with the variety of terrain and the variety of structures. You might find a very, very elegant home way down some gravel road, or you might find a really nice mansion, and then a mile away or just half a mile away, there's a couple of mobile homes run down. Kind of, it's just about a huge variety of. It's just not very homogeneous at all, and actually that's quite delightful if you think about it, because a lot of these mansions, if you want to have a beautiful, huge house somewhere, you can find a beautiful place down some long gravel road and set up a beautiful home on some fantastic view. But on the road down at the bottom of that driveway that you have, just a few doors down, there might be some old mobile home, you see. So that's how it is out here. And it shocks people sometimes. They're driving through a nice, beautiful area, and all of a sudden they go around the corner and they see, like, oh shit, excuse my language, but there's a junkyard there or some old tractors in the woods. So that's the kind of stuff you run into. Now, farmers, of course, had equipment, and over the years, I mean, there wasn't any place to dispose of them, so a farmer would have some machinery on his property, and little by little, as time, after 50, 60 years, the tractor's getting kind of old, so what they do, they just drive it into the woods somewhere and park it there, and it's going to stay there for the rest of the until everybody on Earth passes away, because some of these things, like a big iron tractor, is probably going to sit there for 100 years. So that's one of the things that might shock people if they come out. Another thing is, especially in the east side of the country, we find some really old houses. If you go to the Midwest or far out west, you're not going to find the really old houses. But if you drive around Virginia, you'll see log cabins that are 200 years old or 250 sometimes in some cases. Just really old structures. And they may be dilapidated, but they're still sitting there. And nobody really is paying much attention to them because a lot of times they're overgrown with trees and everything. But you'll find, you go around some corner, you see some old barn sitting there, and it's just going to slowly decay. Now, what happens, sometimes these old barns get sold for wood. And sometimes, if you're really lucky, the people find like maybe a 57 Chevy in one of them or something. But it's kind of interesting, the stuff that you see. There's places I've driven by, even some today. I go around the corner and go, oh, my eyes hurt. But that's the way it is out here. Another thing is the pets. You'll see all kinds of pets out here. Big dogs, small dogs. There are people, you go down some road and some guy's got some dogs down there, and like they bark like crazy. That's why he lives down some gravel road, because he's got a whole bunch of wild hound dogs in there, and they bark all day long and stuff. So that's the kind of stuff you'll see. Also a lot of horses. I saw a pig one time. It's sitting. They let it in the house. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They opened the door, the pig went in. So that's the kind of stuff you see out here. But it's very different. You see, people are so friendly. I've driven down the road, and sometimes people just wave at me. I don't know who they are. I wave back, okay, nice to see you. But maybe it's the first time someone drove down that road for a few days or something. I don't know, but it's very friendly out here. Also, you get some of those characters. I had a neighbor one time. He was in charge of firing the cannons at all these big events and reenactments. And one day he knocked on my door. I went across the road, and he was setting up this cannon, and he fired it 4 times. Of course, no ball came out. It just fired the gunpowder, but boom! And so it's very interesting characters. You hear him playing banjo on his porch in the evening and so on. He said he owned 4,000 acres, and all his pals would come up and go hunting there and so on. So it's very interesting. Where I lived for a while, I would commonly see bears. I would see deer every single day. They lived around where I lived, and I often saw bears even just walking around, getting to the garbage or whatever. So that's another thing you'll see is gravel driveways. Gravel driveways, there's people who make a lot of money on gravel driveways because every time it rains, you'll see those roads get washed out. So there's some roads in the back areas of Virginia that are just gravel. And surprisingly enough, I went on one for 20 miles. I only saw one pickup truck coming the other way in 20 miles on a gravel road. So that's the kind of stuff that you might see out in the country that you might not expect. So be careful when you go down some of these roads, because there are people who, they say, I'll just go down this road here a little bit, and next thing you know, they're going down. There's nowhere to turn around. I did that a few times. I was winding up this road, and I had a Jeep, fortunately, but I realized, man, if a log was across this road, how am I going to get down? But finally I came out and never went that road again, but that's what you find out here. Old barns and homes, I talked about that. All the animals, tractors and trailers and trucks. All kinds of trucks out. And all those telephone trucks, the electrician's trucks, the plumber's trucks, and all those carpenter trucks and all those kind of things. Guess where they park? They're all parked out in the rural area, right on the road that I'm living on. There's all kinds of trucks. There's one guy who's got bulldozers and backhoes and dump trucks on his property, just parked there. That's where they go at night, when they're not being used. So that's the kind of thing that you can actually kind of hook up with somebody in the neighborhood who might have a bulldozer or something, and maybe you need some work done, or they got a backhoe, and you can have them come down and do some work for you. So it's really kind of an interesting situation. You won't find someone with a backhoe in some of these suburban lots. You can't even park a boat there or something. A lot of these developments, much less a camper trailer. And that's another thing you'll find out in the wood. You'll find so many really nice long campers parked on people's properties, and someone's living in there. I mean, they got it hooked up to the electricity, and they got it all set up. They dumped the thing, and they basically just have two residences there, and one of them is a 25-foot trailer. It happens all the time out here, and sometimes they stay for months and months. I've even seen some that it seems like there's a permanent residence in a non-permanent structure, if you know what I mean. So it's very interesting. You won't find that in any suburban development. The distances that you have to drive around, there are ways that you can live within 10, 15 minutes of everything you need, but you're still out in the country. But if you go a little bit further in some of these roads, you'll be like, at night, it's pitch black. I mean, there's no street lights or anything out there. And there's no, there might not even be a 7-Eleven or anything like that. I mean, that's how it is sometimes in some of these areas. So I don't recommend that some people, if you have a small kids or any kind of medical thing, there's areas that I would not recommend too far from a town. But if you're that kind of person, you like your privacy and you want some big land, there's that available out here too. So sometimes it's not very far from each other, because there's some areas here where I was in an area today where there's just like hardly any commercial stores or anything for miles around, but there's a huge amount of cattle and farms and that kind of thing. But you better be pretty self-sufficient if you're going to live like that, because at night, you might have to drive 45 minutes to get to a town. But most people don't live that way. But the people who do, they have their way of preparing and sustaining themselves. So that you can find out in the countryside too. Friendly people, flea markets, farm markets, people love those. That's how they entertain themselves. They have all these markets and all these different events and fairs and all kinds of different stuff, music stuff going on out in the countryside, wineries. It's that kind of entertainment. You don't really have as many of the big venues, not like big city where you have all these big, huge venues and stages and everything. Out in the countryside, you have like usually it's open air, or maybe at a winery, or maybe a brewery will have a room where there's one in town here. Every once in a while they bring a band in there and everybody gets some liquidated and so on. So I just want to give a little heads up when you walk out in the countryside and you ask your agent to come show you some houses, that don't be surprised when you go around the corner and see something you never expected, and maybe it might even be near a property that you would like, but don't be too worried, because frankly I live in a beautiful place right now, but honestly there's a lot next to me that's It's covered in woods and nobody's there, except there are some old vehicles in there, a couple old pickup trucks and so on. And I figure, well, if it comes down to that, I could always fire one up, but I don't think it's going to come to that. But I don't even see them. And basically, that's the way it is out here. They're never going to go away, but the trees keep getting bigger and bigger, and slowly but surely they decay. And there's only a few of them anyway, and I don't see them except in the wintertime. So the rest of my property is really great because I have a huge forest on one other side, and nobody bothers me on the other side. And basically, you got to compromise a little bit sometimes. So one more thing I noticed on my list was water. You find a lot of water out here in Virginia, particularly all the ravines. So the way that your land is might be critical. If you want a stream, it's quite possible to find a property with stream in this state, especially in the hilly areas. But be careful of water because sometimes water can erode a driveway and so on and cause some other issues, in basements in particular. But it's a fun area to live in. It's just delightful. Basically the pace of life in rural areas is just very different. It's not all frenetic, and it's just gentle, and that's one reason I like it. And I invite people to come out and look in the countryside, and if they want to have a family and raise some kids, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing to do, to come out in the rural areas where you have plenty of room and you can have some contact with animals and wildlife and domestic animals and stuff, and just a peace of mind and nice neighbors. So I appreciate people listening. Some of it's a little funny, the stuff that you find out in the countryside, but it's just an interesting way to live. So thanks again for listening. Hope you like and share, and watch other people's content as well. Thanks.